Hi, I am so excited about this new series called Follow Me. There have been some great leaders in this world, haven't there, that people have followed. People like Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, Florence Nightingale, Martin Luther King, Elsie Inglis, who led a team of nurses to save lives in the First World War. But I want to encourage you to follow someone who I believe is even greater than all of those people, and that's Jesus. Often when Jesus was on this earth, he would say to people, "Follow me." Listen to this account of Jesus doing that to two disciples. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, called Peter, and his brother Andrew. They were casting their net into a lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets and followed him. There are three things that happen in that account that I want to share with you. The first is the disciples left their nets. What are the things that hold you back? What are the things that entangle you? What are the things that stop you following Jesus wholeheartedly? How can you, like the disciples, leave those behind and follow Jesus wholeheartedly? So we're going to explore what are the nets that are holding you back. The second thing is Jesus said, "Follow me." What's it like to follow Jesus? What's he like? He's so radical, so exciting. We want to explore and get to know Jesus better and what it means to follow him. And then the third thing is fish, though I don't think that Andrew and Peter caught them quite like this. Jesus said, "Come, I'll make you fishers of people." What did he mean by that? Well, he wanted them to recruit other followers for him. How are they going to do that? Partly by the way Jesus was going to transform their lives. It would be so different, so transformational that people would look and say, "What's happened to them? I want a piece of that." And as Simon and Andrew shared about Jesus, other people would say, "Well, I want to follow Jesus too." So how can we be fishers? How can we let Jesus change us so we're making a difference wherever we are? And how can we point to Jesus in what we say and what we do? Now, this series wants to be really practical. Jesus said it's not enough just to listen to me. Things only change when you obey me. Now, to help you obey Jesus, to follow him, to do the things that he's asking you to do, we've produced this sheet that you'll need to help you when you're listening to these talks. If you've got the link by email, you can download this. You should have it with you now. If you got the link by some other means, then you can get this sheet from our website. You might want to pause and download a copy. And we're going to encourage you to write down what you're going to do in response to Jesus' teachings. Now, the teachings of Jesus that we're going to be focusing on in this series are a group of teachings called the Sermon on the Mount. The teaching in the Sermon on the Mount is so radical, so distinctive, that many people have said it is the finest teaching in the history of the world. People ranging from Mahatma Gandhi to President Roosevelt of the United States to even the atheist Richard Dawkins just say how wonderful this teaching is. So if you want to be changed, carry on listening. Next, let's look first at the things that hold us back. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus took all his followers, all those people who are interested in his teaching, his disciples, sat them down on the mountainside and began to teach them. And he said this, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." Mercy, peace, purity, righteousness. Righteousness means sort of goodness, good conduct lifestyle. Who would argue against things like that? Many people would say they're universal values. They're what everyone wants. And I guess in many ways that's true. But then Jesus said this: "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." The prophets were the people who taught people the ways of God, told them what God was saying. Now, that type of teaching isn't quite so welcome, is it? Insults, persecution, slander, for those promoting peace, goodness, mercy. Jesus, you're telling me that when I do your good things, bad things are going to happen to me? When I'm doing good things for you, bad things are going to come my way? And I'm meant to rejoice in that? Jesus, I'm not quite sure I like that type of teaching. You see, by and large, you and I, and most people, are generally happy for peace and goodness and kindness, as long as it doesn't put us too much out of our way. Charity is a great thing, but to pursue it if it makes me poor, to hunger for goodness to the extent that I mourn, to seek peace to the extent that I'm insulted or persecuted for doing so, no thank you. Hey, I'm generally here for a life I can live in comfort. I want my kids to do well. I don't want to see my parents suffer. I want to be able to retire in comfort. And look, if along the way I can make a little peace, help a few people without disturbing those standards that I have, those lifestyle aspirations that I have for myself, well, I'm in for that. But if it involves being meek, poor in spirited, or insulted, no way, not for me, thank you. Others of you might pursue those things. You might hunger after mercy and righteousness, peace, goodness. You might work hard for social justice projects. But in doing so, you become harsh and judgmental on those who don't work as hard or pursue those things as much as you do. You may even become proud and think, I'm a pretty good person, I do all this type of stuff. Or it may be you love to make a difference, but you just don't think you could. Jesus, I'd love to be able to do all those things, but I just don't have any influence. I don't have any talent. I don't have any skills. It's just not gonna happen. Maybe you think I don't know Jesus well enough. I've not been a Christian long enough. I don't know the Bible very much like all those other Christians. I'd love to, but I can't. Look, any of that type of thinking is like a net that holds you back. And what you need to do is work out what type of net you've got in your hand, what thought patterns you've got in your head, and let them go. Now, to help you do that, in the study guide sheet that you should have printed out, I want you to identify which thought pattern is the one that sort of is in your head the most. If you're not really bothered about things like peace, goodness, righteousness in that first section, nets on the sheet, I want you to circle A. If you're bothered about those things, but only to the extent it doesn't upset your lifestyle or cost you too much, I want you to circle B on the sheet. If you do pursue those things, you do hunger after social justice, after goodness, after mercy, after purity, after peace, but you're quite harsh on others who don't do it as well as you and quite proud perhaps in your achievements, circle C. If you want those things but just feel too weak to achieve them, circle D. And if you have some other thought pattern that I've not mentioned, can you jot that down in E and then circle that one? So you've thrown down your nets and you're ready to follow Jesus. What's he like? Well, to help, I want to tell this story that I heard a long time ago. I think it was from the American War of Independence. Two officers, one junior, one senior, were sitting on their horses, watching their soldiers build a bridge. The work was muddy, dirty, the soldiers were hot, sweaty and tired. The senior officer said to the junior officer, "How about getting down from your horse and helping them?" "Sir," the junior officer replied, "if I got down from my horse in that way, it would be most inappropriate to be mixing with the men." The senior officer didn't say anything. He just took off his jacket, got got off his horse, rolled up his sleeves, and got stuck in building the bridge. The senior officer's attitude was a reflection of Jesus' attitude. Because of his love for God and his desire to fulfill God's plans and to care for the people of this world, Jesus became meek, humble. He left the riches of heaven for you and became poor. He left his father's side where he was honoured and he became meek and humble. He spent time amongst sex workers and dodgy financiers. He became so deeply involved in the lives of others as their friend that he mourned for them at their death. You see, the greatest leaders are those who are willing to suffer for what they believe to be true. Leaders like Martin Luther King and Gandhi actually died for what they believed in. Jesus suffered greatly in pursuing his objectives of goodness, righteousness, and peace. He was persecuted, slandered, and in fact made the ultimate sacrifice, being killed on the cross. But Jesus' seeming moment of defeat was his ultimate triumph. You see, none of the leaders I've mentioned ever rose from the dead, nor did they say to their followers that that's what they were going to do. But Jesus did both those things. He claimed to his followers that he would rise again. Then 3 days after his crucifixion, he did exactly that, giving many convincing proofs that he was alive, including at one time appearing to over 500 people at once. So, what does Jesus' death and resurrection mean to you? It means that Jesus was more than just a great leader or teacher. It means he's Lord over all things. Nothing overcomes Jesus. Not hatred, not pride, not aggression, not riches, not hostility, not division, not even death. Jesus said, "Behold, I have overcome the world." What else does it mean? It means that God is inside you, transforming you if you follow him. Now, following a great leader, you can be inspired by them, you can follow their teachings, but you can never be them. But what's amazing, in following Jesus, you are more than simply inspired by him. He comes to dwell in you, and in some strange way, you become Jesus and Jesus becomes you. We're told that Christ dwells in our hearts by faith. Jesus died on the cross. When you follow Jesus, the bad part, the sinful part of you dies. Then God's Spirit raised Jesus from the dead. And so God's Spirit comes to live in you. Isn't that amazing? The old is gone. The new has come. That means you don't have to worry about feeling weak. It is not going to be your power which will be changing you, changing the world around you. It will be Jesus. The same power that rose Jesus from the dead now lives in you. Many Christians at this point will be saying, "I know all this." Maybe. But what's the difference it's actually making to your life? I know it's good to exercise, but if I don't go, it doesn't make any difference. You see, Jesus calls you to follow him with all that you are. You can tell yourself you're following Jesus, but actually what you're really doing is using Jesus to get your own way. It goes like this. You want the same things that everyone else wants. You want a nice house. You want your kids to do well. You want a healthy family, a successful career. But being a Christian just means you want God to help you get those things that you want, and perhaps get them in a nice sort of way. So you want your kids to do well with good ethics and morals. You want a nice house, but you want to get it fairly. Not too greedy, but not too shabby either. You want a successful career, but you don't want to put anyone out too much to get where you are. You're not following Jesus, you're using Jesus. You're not being transformed by him, you're using him to try and transform your life, your world in the way you want. You may even be using Jesus to justify your social justice project. Following Jesus means going his way, seeking his plans, his purposes. Even though it may cost you money, may bring you tears, may mean you have to be meek and humble, may mean you have to persevere, may mean you have to be merciful when you'd rather get your own back, may mean you have to do what's right when you'd rather do wrong, may mean you have to seek peace even when that takes courage. Following Jesus is in one instance a loss business. For Jesus says whoever wants to lose their life whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it. That goes for us individually, and it goes for us as a church family as well. Now, at this point, it's important to get a Jesus perspective. His eyes are firmly fixed on heaven, and throughout the Sermon on the Mount, he keeps mentioning heaven. He wants his followers fixed, their gaze fixed on heaven. In this section we've read today, he says, for those who truly follow him, great is your reward in heaven. Now, that long-sightedness, that heavenly perspective, doesn't mean you're no earthly good. In fact, quite the opposite. That heavenly perspective, that long-sightedness, actually gets you more involved in the world, not less. It's like the long-sightedness of a student wanting to do well in their exams. It makes them invest more in the present, work harder in their lessons, in their homework, and show more respect to their teacher. On the other hand, the student who doesn't have that long-sightedness messes around and is trouble for all, including themselves. Jesus was able to fully invest in this world because he knew that ultimately God would one day more than make up for all the loss and demonstrate to him the full reward, the full fulfillment of all he had worked for. Take a moment now on your study guide sheet and jot down one of the ways that Jesus is different from any other leader. One of the things that's really struck you about Jesus. I've put a few prompts in there, but you may want to pick up your own thing from this section. And now, fish. How does what Jesus said make a difference? In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus goes on to tell his followers, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. I said right at the start that many of the values Jesus is talking about, peace and mercy, goodness, are what people think of as universal values. But they weren't universal values when Jesus first proclaimed them. The Romans were interested in peace, but only within their empire. They were quite happy to conquer and wage war on those around with them and sell slaves. The Greeks didn't have any time for sexual purity, and the idea in Greek and Roman society that you should care for the welfare of the poor at the cost to yourself was just something they didn't even consider or would have been thought ridiculous. The reason Jesus' values have become universal values, the author Tom Holland, who's not a Christian and has written a study on this, says, is that Jesus' followers so transformed the world and took these values wherever they went, that they've become universal values. Jesus is empowering his followers to be like him in the world they live and transform it like salt and light. Just as salt improves the flavour of food and light guides, cheers and warms us. That's what Jesus wants us to do in our society. Now, a good indication that you're really following Jesus is that you begin to see transformation in two areas: your workplace and school or neighbourhood, and your family. If you're seeing change in these two areas, then it's good evidence that Jesus is alive in you. If these areas aren't really changing, can I encourage you to reflect on how closely you're following Jesus? Are you holding on to some nets that are holding you back? And don't worry about starting small. Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like a tiny mustard seed that a man planted in a field. Although it's the smallest of seeds, yet it grows into the largest of garden plants. Think of transformation in your family, your workplace, your school, your neighbourhood. What could it look like? For example, in your workplace, maybe there are divisions. Maybe there's one group with a sort of power and prestige and credibility, and then there's a second group that are sort of seen as second class in the workplace. Are you willing to be meek and humble like Jesus and lose some of your credibility by spending time and befriending those in the second group and helping them feel of value? Is there conflict in your family? Is it easier just to keep the peace? Or are you willing to do what it takes with Jesus' help and make peace? That means identifying the problems at the root cause and having the grace patience, kindness, and courage to wisely tackle them? Are you willing to come alongside those who mourn in your community and suffer, even if in doing so it will involve you suffering and mourning alongside them? These are the type of things Jesus did, and these are the types of things that he empowers his followers to do too. Now, I want you to use the study guide sheet again. Choose one of the areas in the third section on that sheet: family, work, school, social, and think of where Jesus' salt and light is needed. Just choose one area to begin with. Jot down how you think Jesus' power working in you might make a difference and what that difference could be. And don't think it's impossible. With God, all things are possible. Jesus is living proof of this. He turned the most vicious, bloody, agonizing death on the cross into the most beautiful act of transformation in human history. So I hope you're jotting those ideas down. You might want to go on and spend some more time doing that. But we have talked about nets follow fish. Let's pray. God, I want to follow you. Come and live in me. Help me to be your salt and light in the world I live in. Amen.